So we are have come back from recess. No, come on. Please come in.
Can I shake hands, do you mind?
Sure.
Thanks. Hey, it's a pleasure.
Hey, Anne Marie, nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you. So we returned from recess, and we would like to welcome Mr. Timothy Luff at this time. Good morning, Mr. Luff, and welcome to Norwood. I'd like to open this interview by asking the school committee members to introduce themselves, and we'll start down at this end.
Hi, so nice to see you again, Teresa Stewart.
Hi, Teresa.
Kate Sipping Dunn.
Kate.
Joan Gimlin.
Hi, Dr. Gilman.
David Hills.
And Anne Marie Mazzola. So our format today consists of 3 parts. We invite you to make a brief opening statement, and after that we will have a series of prepared questions we will ask, and we will close by listening to any final comments that you wish to make. A copy of the questions have been placed in front of you. We have scheduled 1 hour for this interview. We each have had an opportunity to review your application materials, and we would appreciate it if you could take 2 or 3 minutes to further introduce yourselves to us.
Sure. Hi, everybody. First of all, it is my sincere pleasure to be here with you today. My visits in Norwood the other day were absolutely incredible. Your community, from your kids to your teachers, to your support staff, to the community and the constituents, were incredible. I am Tim Luff. I am currently the Deputy Superintendent in Natick Public Schools. I've been in Natick for about 12 years now. I came to Natick as the Director of Student Services, managing and engaging in activities around special education, nursing, guidance, ELL, safety and security, and many more. About 2018 or so, I was promoted. Actually, 2015, I was promoted to Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. 2018, I had a small stint as acting superintendent in joint collaboration with the previous assistant superintendent and previous superintendent now, who just left Natick last year. We worked together from that time hand in hand on just about everything the district engaged in and strategized on. From there, about 2022, I became the deputy superintendent, and so now I currently oversee just about every department in the district. Curriculum and technology aren't under me, but I work with them very collaboratively. And I'm just really excited to be here. My passion around education has always been one that is to do what's best for kids, no matter what we have to do. And I am ethical and will always make sure that I am persistent in that challenge and engagement. So, pleasure to be here today, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you. Great, Tim. I have the first question, and you covered a little bit of this, but can you please tell us why you chose to go into education, and then why you want to be the next superintendent here in Norwood?
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was very young, probably 11 years old, I began to volunteer at a special needs camp in Natick for students with disabilities and adults with disabilities. I had a passion from the beginning to just see what the things that I could do and how it could impact kids and adults with more needs than mine. I volunteered there probably 5-6 years. It's a summer thing. And then I became a staff member, taught adaptive daily living and kind of skills like that. And really just it propelled me into the next steps of my career, that being a bachelor's degree at the University of Maine at Farmington, where I studied both special education and psychology. I received my bachelor's degree there, and from there I became a special educator in Maine. My first job was in a K-3 resource room with students with learning disabilities. It was actually a K-8 school. Maine's got some very interesting spreads of school ages and grades. From there, I moved on to a middle school, what we call the day treatment program, which is essentially a out-of-district placement for kids with emotional disabilities. That was grades 5 through 8. Very interesting time in my life. You learn some things about yourself and kids that you wouldn't know about. You know, where they're coming from, and that not everybody's coming into school in the same way with the same things that are happening at home, and you learn a lot. From there, I moved up to the high school level, and I taught in the resource level in a learning center, grades 9 through 12. Did a lot of work with Orton Gillingham at those times, and Wilson training and teaching kids, and transition skills. Really gained a passion for understanding that kids need to have pathways to different things. That it might not just be the traditional academic pathway, but we were lucky enough to have a joint vocational school that was kind of part of the program. So kids would come from me, to then go to math and go work in the auto shop downstairs, and it was just a really nice thing. From there, I became the assistant special services director. I actually carried a half caseload of special ed students at the same time as I was doing administrative work. That was a challenge, I will tell you. But it was a great learning experience. I had a great mentor for special education. Learned a lot about fiscal responsibility in Maine. We were 90% free and reduced lunch, and so we had to think outside the box a lot, and how we developed programs for kids and made sure they got what they need with limited funding. I became the director of special services there. I was there for 2 years, while at the same time getting my master's degree from the University of Southern Maine in educational leadership. From there, I came back to Massachusetts, and I've been in Natick ever since, and I think I shared a little bit of that with you already. But I want to do what's best for kids, and when I got into administration, it was because as a teacher, it was difficult to engage in the educational process when you had this kind of the red tape things around, and you were, and the politics got involved, and I wanted to take that away from the teachers so they could actually do their job, which is to be front-facing with kids and have that opportunity. And every day that I come home, I just hope that I made a difference for kids through all the other pieces that I do. So that's why I'm here today.
Sorry, just to make sure you
Oh,
get the
sure.
second part of the question was just about Norwood specifically.
Oh, of course. I'm sorry. Norwood is an awesome community. I read a tremendous amount about your strategic plan. I read about minutes from your school committee meetings. I've watched some school committee meetings. I've been doing it all. And you have some financial challenges, but what I will tell you, there's no smoke and mirrors here. What you have is what you have. You have a community of kids who feel safe. We had conversations with the kids the other day, and I asked a lot of questions about, how they felt. Can you be your real self when you come into school? How are you feeling about things? And I think the one negative thing they talked about was vaping, which is just about everywhere, right in the hallways. But you have kids that feel safe, and that shows that from the top down, from the school committee, from the town, that there's investments in making sure that kids are feeling good in school and engaged. They were talking about their education at the high school and the rigor behind it, and the pathways that they have to do different things, the nursing programs and your green initiatives, and there's a lot of clean energy initiatives, and there's a tremendous amount that you have going on. It's a community similar to Natick, I feel. You have a lot of things like Natick right now. I feel like when I walked into the high school, I was walking into Natick High, same blueprint, right? Same places. Kennedy, when I was at middle school in Natick, we just rebuilt. When I went to Coakley, I walked into the building and I felt like I was in the old Kennedy, looking out back at this beautiful new school being built that I really recognize because it's the same plan that we have. Worked with AI3 and Compass too as well, so it just felt like home. I sat with your kids in the lunchrooms and cafeterias and classrooms, and they all had great things to share. Kids are engaged, teachers, staff are committed to the work that they do here, and the community is rightfully curious and desire for their kids to get what they need. And it was just been a lovely, everything that I've seen has been what seems like a good fit for me, and I hope that it's a good fit for you as well. So, thank you for catching that second part of the question for me.
So Tim, I have the next question. This position will require a high level of communication with all stakeholders and around initiatives that are new and in some cases perceived as challenging to certain members of our community. Can you please describe your experience both with the overall communication strategies and in particular with change management?
Just starting with communication, I think this is going to be for every single stakeholder, and not just the constituents in the community, but also the school committee and how I communicate in this role with everyone. And if you don't know, you don't know, which means that it has to be consistent. It has to be clear, it has to be concise, whatever message comes out from this office, to ensure that folks have what they need, either to make the decisions that they have to make or to understand why a decision was made in the way that it was. With the unknowns come challenges. So I actually, at the beginning of this year, had the privilege of taking over the communication role in Natick for a little while. We didn't have a communications director, so we had a lot of, we have an engaged newsletter that goes out to families once a week, and we have an insider that goes out to the staff once a week, because both staff and students need to know, both staff and families need to know what's happening in their schools. We made sure that each school newsletter was embedded in there as well with links, so it was an easy kind of one-stop shop. You might have a parent at 3 different schools, and you want to make sure that there's one place to go. If you have more than 2, 3, 4 clicks, it's not going to work very well for families, just as an aside. I will say that we just did a communication around the calendar for next year that I made for the community to go out. Next year's a strange year with the winter break. You have Christmas, which falls on a Wednesday during that week, and so I'm sure you're challenged with the same thing with the calendar. If you've already done that, I'm not sure. I didn't catch that part. And we in Natick had decided to look at all religious holidays and try to have days off, but more so to make sure there are no long-term assignments or major assignments or assessments on those days. So we're honoring all kids and the diversity there. Now, having said that, some of the religious holidays fall on the school days this year, so we were looking at like June 27th as the last day of school. So conversations about Good Friday, and taking that, and having that as a half day. So there's a lot of challenge there. So I brought obviously the calendars to the school committee for a first run. That went through about 3 cycles, but really constantly engaging the community on what those changes might be, getting feedback and input, and giving time to do that. To ensure that once we made a decision, everyone had the opportunity to engage in that decision-making process. And again, in the end, whether it's something that they liked or not, at least they were part of that process. So that's just one example. When we do major changes in programs, when we're going to initiate a new curriculum, a safety initiative that might be occurring at school, we are regularly communicating those out with all stakeholders to make sure that they know what's coming. My next stage, I think I talked about this a little bit the other night, safety and security. We're planning a training for our police partners and fire partners and all of our first responders, likely at our high school in the coming months during April break. And one of the things that I had talked to our police partners about is we need to nail down these details about the when, the how, the where, because we need to start communicating this with families immediately, because people get nervous, right? And so it's just one of those things that regular, consistent, concise communication for everything that we do is incredibly important. So you're welcome.
So I have the next question. Sorry, I'm taking notes. So how will you ensure the safety and well-being of all students and all staff in the district?
Okay. Well, there's emotional well-being and there's physical well-being. So there's definitely both there. Just starting with emotional well-being, I think that every student, when they enter the school building, needs to feel represented, welcomed, not just accepted. Accepted denotes kind of a difference that isn't the same as you. And so that is making sure that our curriculum is robust enough to ensure that when a student opens a book or they see their teacher, they're represented there. I think that's really important. We do that through curriculum audits, making sure with our teachers and our PLCs that we're working through those processes and kind of taking equity pauses and ensuring that those things are there. It is ensuring that our hiring practices are some that promote equity and diversity in our hiring and recruitment processes. Whether that's we develop an equity hiring guide in Natick, so our interview teams are looking at and asking the right questions to our candidates. We're recruiting from everywhere, from different college fairs to different newspapers and cities. Looking at different initiatives to bring in diverse candidates from cities. I talked a little bit about this idea that I always wanted to try in Natick that we're working on with this last 2-mile piece, where we can grab candidates from the cities if they want to go to on the commuter rail and they need a ride, right? So kind of that last 2-mile ride, and then ensuring that I also I should say too wrote our staff diversity grant this year, which allows us to provide incentive bonuses for staff or professional development for staff of color or different diverse staff. So there are those pieces to retain the staff that we have. And that way our students feel as though they're represented by the staff as well. The safety piece of, I will say too, before I go on to the safety piece, is that, you know, when we're looking at issues of macro or microaggressions, we have to address them. There are microaggressions everywhere, and to ensure that our staff are trained in understanding not just the diversity of our students and where they're coming from, but also understand where they are, so they can better learn about themselves, to learn about how to engage in the process, to learn more. We're doing that with the Metco 2.0. You're not a Metco district. We are, so as an administrative team, we are working together with Darnisa Amante Jackson. I don't know if you know her, incredible trainer, understanding where we are as people in our learning, to be able then to spread that out to the rest of our teams in our schools, our administrative teams, hiring teams, teachers, to kind of understand where they are. But also to make sure that if there is a microaggression that we're teaching. We are a teaching and learning organization. We are here to teach our kids that these are real. Microaggressions are real. You know, implicit bias is real. And we're going to learn and together on how to work through it. With macroaggressions that are more explicit, you're going to see discipline, right? You're going to see both for staff and for students, to make sure that we're kind of not tolerating it either if it's severe. Safety, I have been the kind of director of safety as well. It's been under my realm up until about a year ago. I applied for a grant, maybe a year and a half ago now, we applied for a grant to bring in a director of safety and security into our schools. But prior to that, I was running and leading what we call the Natick School Safety Initiative, which brought together our partners in the fire department, the police department, transportation department, facilities department, anyone that would have an act or a role in creating safety procedures for our students. We regularly looked at our safety procedures, whether they were shelter in place, intruder in the building, facility malfunctions, you name it. And we have created a variety of flip charts and electronic tools to use for our training purposes for our staff. As far as how we then disseminate that out to schools, we have crisis teams that we built at every school, which could be 5, 6, 7 staff members, depending on who they are. And they will look at things from incident management to, you know, possible behavioral issues, even to response to intervention or MTSS. And multiple teams deal with different things. The incident management team will be directly trained from the NSSI team, and then make sure that they are spreading that out to everybody in their building. So if there is an incident of safety, physical safety, that we are addressing those things. Created a full wide radio network in Natick, working with our town partners and our capital plans. And a warrant article that we had to create, we have actually a network that goes from building to building to building. So radio from each building, so each school has a base station and multiple radios in the schools to be able to communicate, because communication, not just to the families and everything else, is really important in emergency situations. And I would also say that safety in general, physical and emotional, is about empathy and understanding for what people are going through. And you'll hear me say empathy, I think, as many times as I can today, because just because something feels safe to me doesn't mean it feels safe to someone else. And that could be physical, or it could be safety. Now, this also, kids are coming in with some issues at home, so there are times when we're having protocols together where we have to call DCF, or we have to initiate different responses that way. There are responses for emergency situations, anaphylactic reactions. I had one yesterday. You know, there are all these different things that are there, but the protocols and procedures, I have always been, my handprint's been on those to make sure that those are in play for all situations. So it's a long responding question to a good question. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have the next one. In 3 years, how would you define the success of your superintendency in Norwood?
Well, I'll start by a successor contract, maybe. No, I'm not just kidding. I will say that you have right now a strategic plan that's ending in 2024. You know, and I envision that if I'm fortunate enough to get the position, that I'll be doing an entry plan. That's pretty significant. That's really seeking to gain insight about Norwood and all the wonderful things it has, but also some of the weaknesses, right, that are here. and with you and with our town partners and our teachers and our kids, develop a new plan that, that is for Norwood and for our kids. That will bring us forward. Now, what that is, I don't know yet. I think that in those 3 years, I would like to see many of those initiatives be met. So obviously, developing that strategic plan with you, but then some significant progress towards that strategic plan. I would love to see the academic achievement levels, the SGP, student growth percentiles, go up. I know right now they're 55, 56, depending on where you are. Love to see those get up to the 60s. We'll see. I would love to see a elementary study project that is moving forward. I would love to see a well-built new middle school at Coakley that has accessible features, that has engagement and learning. And I think I would like to see a continued and trustful relationship for me and with the community and the staff and you, because I think having those relationships mean everything for the future, and without them, you don't move very far. So, and I would also like to see a robust social-emotional implementation plan. You know, you're just starting, I think, and I will say this, that every teacher works on social-emotional learning, and every teacher is, you know, working on phenomenal academic skill growth for kids. You know, character strong, I think, is what you're using right now. 2 years now at the middle school, starting to implement at the elementary levels. I would like to see that moving forward, but I would also like to see data measurements to all the things that you're doing, right? You have DIBELS for some of your academics at the elementary level, so what are those things that are in play for social emotional learning? You know, we use something called SABRES right now. We've used a panorama survey for wellness, kind of surveys around the school district, for families and for kids and for staff. So a system in place where we have data-based structures and assessments to determine where we are and to see growth in all of those measures. 3 years. You're welcome.
Okay. To me. So the roles and responsibilities of school committees and superintendents are sometimes clear and sometimes ambiguous. For example, budget approval versus budget implementation, personnel policy and finance versus personnel administration, or even dealing with parents and teachers with concerns or complaints. Can you describe some situations where these roles and responsibilities have challenged you, and how would you work to address them if you were our superintendent?
Sure. So I think that everyone gets on the school committee for a different reason. It could be because you have a student in the district that, you know, has special needs. It could be because you are looking to ensure that the constituents of this town are being supported by a financially sound school system. You name it, right? You're here for a reason. Number one, and I'll give some examples as I can. And I don't know, I did read your norms, and so these are laid out pretty clearly in your norm, which is great. But my communication with each one of you, or the chair, obviously, and the vice chair is incredibly important. So, and I don't know the norm around individual communication with the superintendent, so that is something that I would want to discuss. Just so I can understand where the school committee members are coming from, because like anyone else, you're here for a reason, and I need to honor that reason, but also having the conversation about the roles in that aspect. Obviously, you're going to be here to write policy. You're going to be here to evaluate me. You're going to be here to create and not create, but to, well, create and to approve the budget, and then to be the stewards of the schools and move forward the policy. My role is going to be to implement that budget. My role is going to be to implement that policy. My role is going to be to evaluate the staff, hire the staff, and deal with the day-to-days, there's no doubt. I do find that occasionally school committee members will step in, hear things from constituents, and then come back and they'll voice those concerns at open school committees. That's sometimes difficult in terms of, you know, if you have an administrator or a teacher that has been working on a project for a really long time, just trying to lift it. This is an example that I'm not giving too much specifics here, but if you have a member of your administration or team that has just kind of kicked this thing off and they're just piloting it, just trying it, and it's been a long time coming, a school committee member very easily, by asking one question and saying, hey, I've heard that this thing isn't going that well, right? That can quickly diminish not just that project, but the professional engagement of that administrator. And so those are the kind of things that are worrisome. So having the ability to speak with the members about the things they're hearing, the concerns that they have, I think we can avoid those things. And we've been able to do that, I think, regularly. That's one example. It's just a program that we were developing in Natick. Understanding, I think, special ed programming, for example, it's really easy to hear folks that have negative perceptions on what's happening. I mean, the people that are really happy tend not to come out as much. I wish they did. I'm sure you all wish they did too. So just making sure that, you're regularly speaking with the members as a whole, but also with the chair and the vice chair, to give you the information that you need to be able to know whether that's a valid, reasonable concern or it's something that we're working on, just so you can respond in a way that says, oh, I hear that, talk to the superintendent, I understand what's going on, and actually this is what's happening. I just think that communication piece is so important, because things can really spiral out of control if you don't know what's happening. I mean, you're also validly worried about re-election, you're worried about the kids, you know all these things, and your relationships. So the only way we do this is working together as a team, and it's the communication that would be the most important. You're welcome.
Okay, Tim, next question. When you prepare your budget for the school committee, how do you go about this, and what happens before the proposal reaches the school committee? And additionally, what would happen if the school committee has recommendations that are different from your proposal?
Well, this year, you guys are starting later than we did, so luckily I have some, we've been doing some work this year already. When we start, we're kind of looking at both zero base for schools, the operational pieces, but also level service budgets for salaries and transportation and all those kind of things. Those things that we're doing that we need to continue to do that might have some growth and costs by providing the same service. First step is to obviously work with the principals, asking them to work with the departments first, to have them work with their staff, have an understanding of what's needed in those buildings, meeting individually with those principals on those needs for their buildings. Are there any, what is it that you need? Are these things that are already there, are they still necessary? And then working with them on what they might need more, right? What are those things that you would love to have, or you need more that's over the level service, that's over the zero budget? And asking for justification and data on why those things are. So going through that with not just the principals, but going through that with the all the central office key administrators, multiple budgets out there. I would say too that we have a great relationship with our town partners. So even during this process, we're talking to them on a regular basis. What are you looking at for revenues? What are you looking at for expenses? What's going on with free cash? What's going on with growth and all that? And then kind of having an idea of where they might be sitting, because that's going to really lean into where we can have as a final budget. There's no doubt. Building those relationships before is key. You never want to go and see that your appropriation is significantly less than what you're looking for. But before you get there, obviously we're going through the roles of the principals, the office administrative staff. Then we're looking at the whole strategic plan. What is it in the strategic plan that this budget initiative aligns with? And how does that help you as a school, work towards your school improvement plan, which should also align with your strategic initiatives and plans. Then we are actually working together once we have an idea of what that level service budget would be and what your desired budget could be. We are then working with the town to determine what the appropriation might be. You have a budget balancing committee here, which I think is fantastic. We had something called FPC, financial planning. And it's obviously working with the Finance Commission. We have a Finance Committee, but you have a Finance Commission, your Select Board, to kind of sit together and talk about what the whole town needs. Because the one thing that we don't want to do as a school district is to have positions here or have things here that we don't need that would impact the fire department or the police department or the other rec department, wherever the other pieces in town are. Hopefully together with the, once we have that budget together with the town, we're looking at the gap, if there is a gap, and how we can reduce that gap to ensure that we are within the appropriation from what the town has for us and what we are asking for. That could be through a variety of things. We've done that through circuit breaker regularly, as have you. You know, we too, at one point, I think last year, went over our circuit breaker revenue we used for to close our gap. You know, I think in Natick we were receiving somewhere around 2.2 or 2.3 million regularly. It jumped up after they added the transportation pieces a few years back. So we have increased that. I think 3.7 now. I think you're at 4, but you might get like 3.5 each year. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but making sure that that revenue is equal to the expense is an important thing, and understanding that there could always be cliffs if we're going to use one-time cash. You know, we're still using ARPA right now, so working with the town on the educational part of ARPA. So, you know, working with them and saying, hey, so if you're looking at 3% for us, is there any, you know, can we use ARPA to close that gap? So we're looking at 3% and the 1.6 million they have left in ARPA. Looking at grant funding, obviously, what, you know, for the things that we have in our budget that we're not going to supplant, but that we can supplement, what can we use for grant money to do that? Closing those gaps with the town partners first. And I think I should say, too, that I might have missed the kind of the administrative council team kind of conversations around, you know, what's important, what are the priorities for our district as a whole. I think that's an important part of this. And, you know, I don't think we do enough of it, but surveying the community about what their needs are and what they're requesting is really important. That's going to come out later, but knowing that beforehand is a really important part of building the budget. Obviously, then coming to the school committee and saying, here we are, we've gone through this process, we've worked with our town partners, we do have a gap or we don't have a gap, and here's how we're planning on filling it. You know, in order to close that gap, we might have to do X, Y, and Z, making hard decisions with you and making recommendations to you so you can have a better ability to be able to make the right decisions. And then hopefully coming together and then sending it to Finance Committee for their approval, presenting regularly to Finance Committee. I've done that regularly. Not just the special ed side, but the whole budget side. Strong proponent, even in my special ed days, of talking about the curriculum side of things, because a robust core curriculum means special education. Hopefully costs will be reduced over time along with those interventions, so we've always kind of done it together. And then obviously hoping to get a yay from the Finance Commission and then taking it home at town meeting. So if you didn't agree, I would probably hope that we would have that disagreement in the commissions or the meetings that we've had prior to kind of go through in the budget subcommittee. So when you come to the table to vote on the budget, that I'm recommending it's something that we've created together, that's in the best interest of kids in the district, that really meets the needs of the town as well. You're welcome.
So I have the next question. So the main point of a school system is to educate. And so how do you work to achieve high academic outcomes and increase test scores, which is the barometer by which the state measures things?
Sure. This is all about working our PLCs. The professional expertise of our teachers is by far going to produce the greatest outcome for our students in academic achievement. Having a viable curriculum that is both rigorous and has access points for all of our students is probably the most important thing that we can implement in any school system. That means that we are looking for new curriculum that actually meets the needs of today's learners. I have regularly engaged in our curriculum meetings with our staff and our school committee, both in Maine and here and in Natick. And it's vetting curriculum and the curriculum audits that we do every 6 years to ensure that we're doing that. We just changed math programs in Natick. We went to something called illustrative math, Big Ideas Math at our high school. We were using Big Ideas at the middle school, allowing those professionals to work together, not just as a PLC from, for us, K to 4 and from 5 to 8 and from 9 to 12, but also kind of a K through 12 system where they vetted the curriculum, they tried and piloted new ideas, and then they decided what would engage kids the most and provide them the best in academic performance. The same goes for ELA, the same ELA, and for our sciences. Same thing goes for our fine and performing arts, you name it. Like, we want to make sure that we have a viable curriculum for everyone. Assessments, regular assessments of our kids, looking at the data to understand why our kids are performing where they are. So that's using the PLCs as data teams to throw it all out there. Identify the challenges kids are having, identify where kids are engaging in a way that, they're performing high, and then bringing it up to make sure that it's going into not just what curriculum we're using, but how we're implementing that curriculum, and to make sure that our staff are implementing in a way that is consistent, not just at their school, but across grade levels and aligned K through 12. I would say the same thing about social emotional learning. And then making sure that at the high school level especially, that we have a rigorous curriculum and alternative pathways for kids to engage in learning. If kids are engaged and the teachers have had the professional development to do that, then our kids will meet that bar. Some of your kids talked about AP courses and the rigor. And it's really just not just letting it go. It's professional development for the staff, and it is regularly looking at that curriculum, so our assessment scores show that increase over time. You will?
I have the next one. Can you give some examples of how, in your previous roles, you have worked with staff, parents, students, and municipal partners to build support for the public schools?
Yeah. Right now, we are working on a human resource study for the entire town of Natick, and I'm one of the 3 people who initiated a grant, actually a RFP through UMass, and they were doing a study of the entire community. The idea is that we want from pre-K all the way to folks of older age, what is, not pre-K, but even younger, birth to all the older age, what are those things that the community needs to support, whether it's medical care, or it's housing, or it's education, or it's after-school care, or just education in general, you name it. So UMass is doing the study. We are regularly communicating with the entire constituency about that. We're soliciting feedback as we speak right now for a survey to actually identify the needs, kind of do a need assessment for the town that includes the schools. I bring that up, and that's going to be, we're probably going to be done with that in a year or two. But I bring that up because I wanted to talk about after-school care a little bit. We last year or 2 years ago, decided to close one of our elementary schools, and it was really challenging. The communication around that, although the folks in that community will tell you that it wasn't enough. And one of the things that came out of that was the after-school program at that school, and we decided to kind of phase it out. So we went, there were no kindergartens one year, and then there was no first graders the next year. But with that, the after-school program that was at that school couldn't function anymore. So facilitated engagement with the YMCA in the area to actually bring their program into that school. That took a tremendous amount of communication with our town partners to get them set up in the school, as far as permitting, health standards, the whole 9 yards, but also working with the YMCA to kind of set that up. And then I drafted an MOU with them and a contract with them that allowed our staff that were still in the school, because we still had 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade there, to feel incredibly comfortable with a different program being there, and to ensure that the needs of both parties were met. We had something like a 400 student wait list, right, for after-school care in Natick, which is a lot. I know that you guys are shifting over to the rec department next year. I'd love to hear more about that if I have the chance to come in. But working with the town partners to do that. So now I submitted to the MSBA a few weeks ago the kind of closure notice, because you have to do that 6 months before you close a school, and I was really sad because I actually really love that school. It's a community school. But now we're giving it back to the town, and because of the ADA accessibility, there's going to be a change of use. So We have been working regularly with the town and the YMCA, our building department, and other stakeholders on what we can do with the building. The Y is not going to be able to be used there, unfortunately, so now I'm working with the local church to actually help them get the YMCA programs in there. We have our post-secondary program right now, we call it Achieve 18 to 22-year-old program at a local church, which is in downtown Natick, which is created to give them opportunities for transition skills and job skills. But we're working with the YMCA now to kind of join a collaborative contract to get them a lower cost to be able to have our after-school care there. So that's working with the town administration. That's working with kind of some of the agencies and the churches and you name it. It's all hands on deck to get what's right for kids. So that's just one example. You're welcome.
Next one. What have you done in your experience to try to make your special education department work better? How have you looked at ways to contain costs, and how have you balanced the needs of students with the fiscal responsibility of the school department?
Yeah. When I first came into Natick, the special ed, first of all, the special ed department is wonderful. I think that's just, anybody that's working with students with needs are there for a reason, and it's a good reason. It's to support kids that are challenged, that have challenges. The programming that you have in your district is the most important thing that you can do to contain costs for special ed purposes. And when I talk about program, I'm not just talking about your sub-separate programming, but I'll start there in terms of having programming so you are not having to send kids out of districts, when I first came to Natick, I remember I was in Maine. I think we had 2 kids that were out of district, and district was 3,500 students or so it's not like it was a small district, but the closest out of district placement was 50, 60 minutes away, so it was easier there not to to do that. But I built programs there. In Natick, I remember signing my first set of contracts for outside schools, and I said, $300,000. This is okay. It took me a little while to sign that. And some kids need out-of-district programs, so I have no issue there. But Natick had programming, but I made it more robust in terms of making sure that each school, for the most part, elementary school, had a specialized program, so kids could be educated with their same age, non-disabled peers at home first. And not only was that right for kids, but the cost containment from when you're not sending a student out of district, and you can send them to their home school for a teacher and a paraprofessional, even with the costs that you get back from circuit breaker, it's substantial. So building those programs in district is important. Also making sure that they are meaningful and they are right for the kids. You can easily say, I'm going to have a classroom, I'm going to open it up, but it's got to be right for the kid because the IEP team has to be able to say, this program meets the needs of Johnny or Jill or whoever it might be that's going to be going into that program. Professional development for the staff in those programs, incredibly important. Looking at the expertise of the staff in those buildings. You can very easily get a paraprofessional. You might get a better bang for your buck with a registered behavior technician who has some behavioral expertise and some training, which you can also then bill Mass Health for. So there are different aspects there to bring funds in to support your programs. And also, I will just say it doesn't answer the question here too much, but aligning it so kids don't have to be moving all over the place. When I first came to Natick, you would be in a program from K to 2 if you had this disability, and then you'd have to be moved across town to a different elementary school, and then maybe go to a different middle school, maybe at 2 middle schools, and then off to the high school. So now in Natick, you'll see if you're in a school that's K to 6 and you have to not be in your neighborhood, you're going to be there from K to 6. We're going to support you then to the transition up to the middle school. They align to the actual middle school that they would go to, and then up to the high school. So they're with their peers all throughout. I just want to make sure I get. So that's that part. The robust curriculum, your regular education instructional curriculum, if those access points that I talked about before are there, you're going to find ways to provide inclusionary activities and services for kids that would result in fewer referrals to special ed services. If you're supporting the curriculum, I saw a tremendous amount of literacy interventionists and coaches, behaviorists in your schools when I was here to visit, bringing them into the fold in order to consult and train with staff to make sure the kids can be in their schools, so you don't get to the point where they have to be sent out is incredibly important. I will talk about my self-determination piece here now, which I know some of you have already heard. I truly believe that engaging students in their education is the most important thing that we can do, which means they have to have skills and self-determination, which means they understand their strengths, who they are, their weaknesses, their challenges, who their support systems are, and then they're able to kind of set goals for themselves and follow through and develop a plan to implement those goals. And then not fail, but if there's a challenge with the outcome, come back and try again. A skill that I think we all need. I'm still working on it, we're all working on it. So in Natick, I implemented that self-determination model from pre-K all the way to age 22. And I did share a little bit about this in my resume, I think, but what that means is, and I started in Maine thinking, hey, I want to have student-led IEPs. That was my big thing, because student-led IEPs were the greatest thing, and in Maine I tried to do that. There was some financial things, it just did not work out the way I wanted to. So when I came to Natick, I said, so how can I do this, right? I'm going to be here long term. I want to start something that I can see it finish. And I spoke to some different professors, ended up with Dr. Lori Peterson out of the University of Northern Colorado, who said, Tim, you can't just have students sit in front of an IEP meeting. You have to have them learn the skills to do that. And what those skills were is just what I talked about. So we implemented kind of experts at each of our school levels where they were teaching other staff and piloting it first, but engaging kids in these learning activities so when they got to the IPT meeting, they could engage in it somehow. The end result, at preschool, kids would bring books in about themselves, right? So it would, they couldn't share it necessarily, but it would be about them and what their strengths are and what they were working on, maybe one of two things, At the elementary level, it turned into kids recording themselves to show at the IEP meeting where they would say, Mom, my struggles are in math. This year, my goal was here, and so I did X, Y, and Z, and look where I am now. At the middle school level, it turned into kind of self-IME presentations where kids would open up their computer and they would present, and they'd say, here is what I like, here are my strengths, here are my needs, here's how you can help me get to what I want. And by the way, this is what I want. And at the high school, it became full-on student-led IEPs where kids were doing the whole thing by themselves. At the middle school, it was great, by the way. I just share because, IEP team meetings aren't the most comfortable things all the time. Parents have their thoughts on what they want. School staff have their thoughts. Advocates have their thoughts. And I remember this one meeting that I went to observe. And I remember, an advocate was there, and the parent was there, and the staff was there, and there was kind of a relationship that just wasn't the most beautiful thing in the world. But the kid opened up the computer and started sharing, and it took all the air out of the room, and then it became about that kid. And I say it because if you can engage kids in that way throughout their process, then they're going to want to learn, and they are going to learn. And in that case, you're not looking at possible special ed. And of course, these kids were already in special ed, and I started it there, but then we started going to, hey, let's do this at parent-teacher conferences. Let's, so we're doing it that way. Let's do this with our general ed staff. I will say, once COVID hit, the whole thing went, right? I mean, that was really hard for me, but COVID was hard. Teachers didn't know how to get online and do the IEP, so it was difficult. But those are some ways. We were always looking at additional funding sources. There are ways to increase your Chapter 70, just making sure your enrollment numbers are right on October 1st, looking at it again in January, and looking at it again in April when we're submitting those things. That's working with your administrative staff and, when they're entering the IEPs to make sure that stuff's all there and accurate. There's looking at circuit breaker reimbursement. There's looking at different grants for learning. But really, I think it's going to be your base curriculum that you're starting with and going from there. You're welcome.
Okay, I have the next question. So can you describe your management style with your direct reports? How do you build and maintain an administrative team? And how do you promote professional growth among your administrators?
Yeah, so a continuous feedback cycle. I try to give them everything that they need to be able to be there for their teachers, because their teachers are on the direct lines with the kids, and there's really no time to waste in a school day. The most important thing that I can do not only is hire the right administrators, and I've hired more than 25 now, I think, principals in our district, or been part of that, and that process, and hundreds of teachers. It's hiring the right people and then providing them support they need on a daily basis. And when I mean on a daily basis, call me when you need me, and they have no problem calling me when they need me. So I feel like that is the primary function of this job, and not that the school committee is not the most important here, but working with the principals so they have what they need on a whim to be able to do that. We have bi-weekly administrative council meetings where we are talking about our strategic plan, we're talking about our initiatives, we're talking about things that are occurring in the school, new things that we have to do in training, whether it's restorative practices or work on equity, you name it. We are making them both professional development kind of sessions, but also sometimes sit and get sessions. We used to do sit and get all the time. We have evaluated that over the years and determined that it's much better to be able to have that PD time because it's more meaningful to them. And if you could put it in email, you probably shouldn't take them out of schools to be able to come over and see you and to do that. I am a listener. I engage with my directors at the central office. I engage with my principals, and I hear their concerns. And then I assess with them, and then I take action on what we have to take action on. I will not be and am not a person that will hear what they say and say, okay, I'll take care of it, and then nothing happens. You have to take action because they have to see you lead in a way that they feel like they can trust, and they will take chances for you. So that's me giving them autonomy to work in their buildings as they should through ed reform, but also me providing them regular continuous feedback cycles to be able to support what their needs are in their school, and to me helping them problem solve and work with them on a regular basis when those issues come up. It's creating policies and procedures for the schools to make sure they know what to follow. It is providing really meaningful evaluations for them on a regular basis. And they're real evaluations. Hearing what one of the things I always say is, do you like your job, and how can I make it better for you? What are your goals? Where do you want to go? What can I do to help you get there? And then helping them with those processes. And then, checking in regularly on that, mid-year check-ins. And the final evaluation is always, so how'd you do, right? It's no different than the self-determination model I was talking about with kids. So it's really working with them to understand what they need, providing them the support that they need, whatever way that looks for them. You're welcome.
So Tim, can you tell us more about implementation strategies that you have used to ensure district strategic plans and policies are carried out on all levels? Yeah.
So during COVID, this came out more than it ever needed to. So we set up, we had our ad council meetings, but we set up a kind of a Wednesday 1-hour check-in. And literally, I think I took every procedure that we had created, and we had 3 of them that we would go through at every single Wednesday meeting. And that was huge when it came down to kind of health-related procedures and policies, attendance policies. We had to work on Title IX when those pieces came out, restorative practices when those pieces came out. Trying to get small pieces out at a time to the principals. What I learned in 12 years is that it's really hard because you've done something, but then you have turnover and you have to do it again, right? So it's important to continually cycle through those similar as you do the curriculum when you have new folks come on. But it's training both at the beginning of the year, it's training throughout the year. That's the procedural part, and I think with our strategic plan, when we're looking at equitable practices, we have a profile of a graduate. We're regularly looking at, how do we get kids to be empathetic? How do we make sure that the learning is strong and continuous? It's working with them on a regular basis. And then going out, I think, to teachers and to schools on a regular basis. I share this all the time, but when you can get out to the schools, that's when you learn the most about what's going on in a teacher's classroom, whether it's personal or it's professional, but you hear both. And you're able to know if part of the strategic plan isn't being met for whatever reason, whether it's the implementation of the reading program, you understand the whys, and then you can cycle back and you can learn from it and you can take action to make it better. I would also say that policies, whenever, and I am the administrator to the school committee on the policy committee, I'm always looking for feedback from stakeholders from the schools before I did that, especially with the DoorDash policy that we just made, by the way. It was a great one. There's serious concern about safety of kids and people coming in, and, if we have queries that say you can't have unmonitored contact with kids, but kids are running out to these people in the cars grabbing their stuff, it's an issue, right? So, but really talking to the principals at the elementary, middle, of the staff, so now we have one where, and parents too, who might need those things to get their kids food. So now we have a piece where, kids can't take orders, can't get them, but you might have a staff member that's able to do that, or athletics, right, that kind of stuff. Because the team might need food, and you just don't want the kids being unmonitored. So, but getting that feedback on a regular basis before we implement and before I even recommend to the policy subcommittee that we want to look at this one. So those are just some. I'm looking at my time, so I don't want to take too much more.
Thank you. So that is actually all the questions. I don't think we have any time for follow-ups, unfortunately, which that's great. That means you've had some pretty detailed answers for us. So if you would, could you please take the next few minutes to make any closing statements? And if you wish, you can ask us questions as well.
Sure. I would just say that Norwood is a place of history and tradition, and I think that when I was really surprised, not surprised, but I think welcomed into the buildings, and learned that most of the people that I met have been lifelong Norwood residents, and I think that's fantastic. I think that with that comes, with new folks moving in, comes some struggle. And I just want to share with you that even though I'm not a lifelong Norwood resident, I will treat Norwood like a gem in a way like I was. I am equipped and prepared to lead the administrative team and the principals. I understand their departmental needs, what they're doing, and I can provide feedback to them in all of those areas. I have a way of building relationships with people where we can think outside the box together and come to collaborative decision-making. I respect the hierarchy of the town and the school committee, giving the principals autonomy, and the ability to give people the opportunity to lead in the way that is best for them to get our final end result of what's best for kids. And I promise you, through all of my time, if I have this opportunity, that I will go to bed at night knowing that I did what was best for kids that evening, and the decisions were made for them through you. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll come back by and shake hands again?
Absolutely.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
Good to
in.
see you again.
Okay, so we'll take a 10-minute recess. Can I have a motion to?
So
Moved by David, seconded by Joan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we'll have a 10-minute recess until the next candidate.